So by the way, she's on a plane to Singapore the minute this ends. So just to show you her life hasn't slowed down. But I just said to her, like, how's it been since leaving? 12 years as CEO. This is a job all women want, or so many women want. And she broke into this huge smile. And she was like, it's great. And you've also described being a CEO as pretty brutal at times. So
I'll tell you what it is. It is brutal. It's a great privilege to serve as a CEO. And you have enormous responsibilities, and you're always in the public eye. But then, I spent 25 years in PepsiCo, 12 years as a CEO, and I gave my heart, soul, everything to the company. And when I stepped down, I thought I was going to be devastated, bereft, everything. Today, I don't even remember having run the company.
Wow.
I don't even remember. I don't even remember
a self-driving company. We have self-driving cars. It was a self-driving.
No, it's just that I'm so busy outside. I don't miss the company. I miss some of the people, but when you really talk about the CEO job, no.
But that word brutal sticks with me. And not to be, a downer, I know obviously it was an honor to serve and it was a great run. But what was the brutal side of it?
You see, I think when you're a female, a colored woman, immigrant, serving as a CEO of a large company and undertaking a transformation, every day there was a critic. I'd say the critics to supporters mix was like 80% critics and 20% supporters.
Wow.
And so all the time you were in the public eye trying to answer the critics, sort of allay their fears. So it was a grind all the time. And you had to do it with great aplomb, because if you were down, they read too much into it. So,
was there a moment where you learned that? Like, you were down and then you learned that was a bad idea?
In PepsiCo, there's a flagpole where you just get off from the car because you can't park right next to the building. And then you have to walk up a long driveway to get to the building. And all the other buildings are around you. And Steve Reinemund, who was the CEO before me, said, I have a piece of advice for you. On your worst day, when you get off of the flagpole, walk up the driveway as if you're the most confident person, smile, look up, because everybody in the buildings is looking at you. You see how you feel and what you're transmitting as, a message. So two things. The first couple of years I did that. After the third year, I told the driver, take me right up to the building. I said, I'm not walking, because some days you just feel the weight of the job
world on you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what is your guidance to people who are leaders who are feeling the weight of the world on their shoulders?
Look, everybody's waiting for you to buckle under pressure, okay? Especially for women, unfortunately. The expectation is that you won't be confident and you won't be able to withstand tremendous pressure. So when you have to go through all the pressure, act as if you're confident, you're absolutely in control. And if you really do need to scream or have a good cry, which I did now and then, I locked my room. And I said to my secretary, don't let anybody in here for 15 minutes.
Did you cry?
Yeah, sure.
You cried. Okay, I want to know that. Okay.
Out of frustration.
Frustration, yeah.
And then put the makeup back on. Back again.
You should all know, too, if you don't remember, that you were the target of an activist investor, Nelson Peltz.
A couple of them.
A couple of them. And, he actually kind of, I don't want to say surrendered, but kind of moved on. Yeah. And also activist investors have targeted other women CEOs. But I wanted to move on to the Business Roundtable in the United States. For people who are in Canada and didn't read about this. The Business Roundtable, which is Fortune 500 CEOs, came out with a statement last month saying that the mission of a company should not be just to its shareholders and not just short-term profits, but in fact, you have a responsibility to a range of stakeholders. You have a social responsibility. You have a responsibility to the community that you serve in. And it's interesting that you were on this early on, you performance with purpose. But I want to hear about, okay, that's great, but I want to hear about the slings and arrows you had to take to make it happen. I mean, what was the reality of trying to implement that?
Well, I was trying to do something very simple. When I looked at the world, when I became CEO, I saw some trends which worried me. The trends were, an increasing focus on health and wellness, people trying to make sure they focused on prevention rather than cure, I saw a larger focus on environmental issues. There were more water-distressed areas that were worried about companies coming and taking water from their aquifers. I saw an increased focus on greenhouse gases, on landfills getting filled up, and people didn't want plastics to go in. And our talent base had to come from the entire population, not just from a segment of the population. So we had to create a company that was way more inclusive and not just brought people in, but retained them. So I knew we had to take a great company and make it greater. So we set about doing things like reducing the fat, sugar, and salt in our products without sacrificing the taste.
And there were a lot of them. I remember talking to you early on. Like,
look
it was
at our
very hard to get
portfolio.
Americans to buy healthy food
Well,
back in the day. Yeah.
Imagine
Yeah.
taking Lay's potato chips, which is a salty potato chip, and reducing the salt.
Yeah.
Okay?
Good luck
the
with
key
that.
thing is, this Lay's potato chips today have got about 20% less salt than it did in 2006 because we took it down, a little bit every few weeks so that you'll never know that the salt went down.
I interviewed you, I don't know if you remember this, but like one of the times I interviewed was like 8 years ago when you were basically saying you had to trick consumers into buying healthy.
No,
and
no,
that's what you
we
did.
have to sneak healthiness.
Yeah, you had to
Sneak healthiness.
Yeah.
I mean, the best example I'll give you, Lay's chips would get fried in something called HOSO, high oleic sunflower oil, which is a heart-healthy oil. It costs a lot of money for us to do that. We put a big sunflower on the bag, and we were so proud of making the transition. The consumer complaints just went through the roof, and the sales plummeted because they said it tastes awful. So the next day, we took off the sunflower from the bags, and people said, thank God it tastes the same. It's still fried in HOSO, okay? I was not backing off from the healthy part, all right? And so all that we were doing in Performance with Purpose was saying, we'll still deliver performance, but we're going to change our portfolio to make it lower in fat, sugar, and salt, and dial up the good for you. We're going to reduce our plastic use, our water use. We're going to reduce our greenhouse gases. And we're going to make this company a great company for everybody who wants to work in the company, not just a few people. But all of this required investments. R&D investments, required investments to figure out how to reduce the water use. So I told them, this is what we're going to invest. And they told me the following. They said, you're not Mother Teresa. Why do you have to reduce the fat, sugar, and salt? I'd look at them and say, have you changed your eating or drinking habits? Oh, yeah, I have, but don't worry about me. I don't want you.
And these are investors?
Yes, very much.
I mean, these are shareholders, or who are these?
Fund managers.
People on your team?
Big owners. Well, people on our team actually embraced it and said we had to do this. Because they were hearing it from their family members who said things had to change.
But they're not paying for it. The investors and shareholders are paying for it.
They're not paying for it. They're creating a long-term, sustainably performing company. But they were more interested in the short-term profit performance. Now, remember, it's not that we were delivering bad short-term performance. We were just balancing short-term performance versus long-term investments. Nobody should beat an index all the time. If you're doing that, that means you're underinvesting. Unless you're in the tech sector.
That's a great
in which
line.
case you're
no
held.
one should beat the index
You can't beat an index all the time. You just cannot in a traditional industry. And if you're a tech company, you're held to a different standard anyway. So if you're beating an index all the time, you have to ask the question. Let me put the math in front of you. If your sector is growing at 3%, and your revenues are growing, let's say 4%, and your profit is growing 10%, what the hell's going on? You must be cutting costs somewhere, or you've got phenomenal innovation. So look at the innovation. Is it yielding price premiums? Not really. If it doesn't, where is your margin coming from, margin leverage? It's got to be because you're cutting costs. But are you cutting so deep that you're not investing back in the company? My point was, I will give you a good spread between revenue and profits, but it's not going to be extraordinary. Because I'm going to reinvest back in the company, because people like, not me, just all CEOs should run a company for the duration of the company, not the duration of the CEO. Because it's very easy to say, I'm going to be CEO for 6 years.
Duration of the company, not the duration of the CEO.
And that's forever, okay? Because you can say to yourself, I'm going to be CEO for 6 years. I'll cut all the investments for 6 years, deliver fantastic profits, retire, the next person comes in, and what happens typically? They crash the financials. And they create, quote, alpha. Then they run it for 6 years. Then they again crash the financials. That is no way to run a company. And I thought my success should be judged by how my successor did, not just based on what I did. And he's doing very well.
And you're doing
He's
well,
doing very well.
and the
Very
payoff
proud of him.
shows. And one of the things I've always loved about you, Indra, is your candor. We talked about, I remember talking to you about what you were just talking about, the fast food or unhealthy food way back, but you've also been really candid about work-life balance. By the way, I interviewed Indra in front of Navy midshipmen at the U.S. Naval Academy.
Oh, yes, I remember.
It was, oh my gosh, this auditorium full of women in white Navy uniforms, dress uniforms, who were students there. Wasn't that powerful? That was,
and now I teach at West Point, so you can
that's just
imagine,
amazing, right?
in front
It's
of all
like-
these camouflage-wearing men and women.
It's really great. But a few years ago, you said women can't have it all. What did you mean by that, and do you still believe that?
Look, that was an interview at the Aspen Ideas Festival when Anne-Marie Slaughter had written an article about can women have it all?
Right.
Whatever it means, my only point was the following. Being in a job is a full-time job. Being a mother is a full-time job. Being a wife is an almost full-time job. For an Indian person, being a daughter and a daughter-in-law are also full-time jobs, okay? Because we have responsibilities to the family, you know? The expectation is that you would be a dutiful daughter-in-law, a dutiful daughter. You try to balance all of this, it doesn't work. Right. So my husband always tells me, the problem with you, he says, with a smile, is your list goes PepsiCo, PepsiCo, PepsiCo. Then comes your daughters. You know, when he's upset, it's your daughters. Right. Then your mother. Somewhere in the bottom, I'm there. He should be happy he's on the list. Okay? Seriously. But I will tell you, and I've said this before, I will tell you, when you have somebody with a high-powered job, which all of us have here, and you have kids, and you have families to think about, especially if you have aging parents, the person that hurts the most is your spouse.
Yeah.
The person that hates her. I mean, I'll give you an interesting story. I hate the fact this is live streamed because of my public life, my private life is for the whole world to hear. You know, when my kids were small, when I came home from work, I changed into this flannel nightgown that had holes in it. And my kids loved it because they knew if mommy changed into the flannel nightgown, she's not going anywhere. Aww. That was a test for them.
Yeah.
They'd love to hide inside the gown and they would sort of wrap themselves around me. To them, that was heaven. My husband would come from work and say, oh God, not this flannel nightgown. Because it was so awful.
Yeah.
But you know what? Seriously? 2 babies?
Yeah. And you
Baby's
and one
ready.
of those babies grew up and expressed some frustration with you for being gone all the time.
Oh, well, she's still, you know, girls are like,
Yeah.
I get a lot of that. I get a lot of that, trust me. You know, I'm like this duck on top, but down here it's like, whoo.
Yeah. Questions. Raise your hands for questions. We'll get to them and take the mic over here. What's your advice looking back to, you're writing a book about work-life balance. What's your advice to women trying to manage family and ambitious careers?
The tack that I'm taking in the book is that to integrate work and family is going to be a challenge. It requires multiple issues to be addressed. The first thing is that when you come into the workforce, you have to address the whole issue of unconscious bias. Because when bias happens in the workforce, it strips away a woman's confidence. When it attacks your confidence, it attacks your competence. It's a vicious circle. And so it's very, very important that we stop talking about unconscious bias and actually do something to address it. Now, two things. The onus is not just on the men, it's also on the women. I think as women, our sisterhood has to get much stronger. I've talked about my binge-watching Sex and the City, 94 episodes of it, okay? Let me tell you,
She's
I'd
catching
never
up.
seen it.
It's been a while.
I
You
had
hadn't
never
seen any of it?
I'd never heard of, I'd heard of it. I thought it was a
Imagine
porn
all
show.
the things you missed.
I didn't know what it was. I didn't grow up here, guys. I didn't watch that show. But it popped up on my HBO screen one day, and I said, you know, the fashions look good. Let me see what it is. So I popped it. I loved the first episode. So I watched all 94 episodes of it, staying up all night. But you know, you can fast forward.
And plus you counted them. Like, I love
Well,
it.
it's
You
94.
multiplied by, you know,
I fast
the
forward a lot of
seasons.
them.
Yeah.
But what I loved about them is every episode had a lesson. But the sisterhood was so strong. They never judged each other. They supported each other.
true.
They could talk about Mr. Big in a very private environment. To me, for those of you who haven't watched it, watch it. It's a lot of fun. The reason I bring this up is we need our own sisterhoods. Unconscious bias can only be addressed is if the sisterhood decides to support each other, to call out the unconscious bias. We tend to compete with ourselves. And I think it's getting better, but we have to really step it up.
That's so well said.
Hi.
And, introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Ashley Tappan with Insigniam. I was going to ask you, Indra, about if you're going to write a book, but now we heard that. So my two other questions are, one, I heard you once share that you had baked lays at dinner instead of naan. Is that true?
Baked lays, what?
Instead of naan.
That's
Oh,
not
instead
true
of
at all.
naan.
No.
Cannot do it. Absolutely not.
Okay.
One is
Good.
crispy, one is soft. Never mix it.
Right? Naan is so good. And then my second question then, since I know that you're writing a book, is what's on your bucket list now?
What's on my bucket list?
Well, what's
now?
already? What she's
I
gonna
got to
answer
get
what
the
she's
book
already
out.
doing.
The book is going to
It's a big
take
bucket.
forever, okay?
Yeah.
But, besides all the work stuff I'm doing, I'm crazy busy. Some years ago, I decided I wanted to learn ballroom dancing. So I started about 3 years ago because I stink it.
With or without your husband?
Without my husband, of course. Are you crazy? Can you imagine? If I start to lead him, he's going to say, not again. So I started to learn. A great teacher, young kid from England, terrified of me because he's never come across a student like me because I'm like, let's get going, no talking. But what's the schedule? When are the tests? And so since culturally I have nothing to do with ballroom dancing and I stink at it, I decided I want to be good at it. So I go for lessons at ungodly hours in the morning, and normally a lesson is 45 minutes, but I do 2 lessons at a time, and this poor kid shows up early in the morning, gives me the lesson, and I'm making progress. So my bucket list is to
Learn ballroom?
nobody outside is allowed to see me dance, but I want to dance in the mirrors or surrounding the studio,
Without
feeling
your
great.
husband. Okay, that sounds great. Okay.
That's okay. You know what? It won't
He
work with
wouldn't
him.
want to
2
do it
left
anyways.
feet.
Okay. Any other bucket lists?
Um,
Let me ask you. Patty wants me to ask you this. Yeah, it's a Patty question. So you've been involved in politics tangentially, and you've been, people talk about you. You've been talked about for the World Bank, et cetera. Would you entertain any of that?
See, the problem is that today when you go into politics, you are working the political system as opposed to doing the job. I'm used to doing the job. And so it won't work for me because I don't want, if the day a president gets elected, to me, all of us serve the entire public. So if I'm allowed to just do the job, yes. But if I have to work in the political system, I just don't know how to do it. But Patty, I'm not even the most powerful woman. What am I doing here?
Yeah.
You're a forever most powerful.
Once an MPW, always an MPW.
I have to tell you, the toughest thing about stepping down was that I'm not going to be on the list anymore. I am bereft, Patty.
I think we had a question from my 3, or next. Oh, we have a lot of questions. Yes, sorry, stand up.
Natalia de Grave, when you were at the top of Pepsi, regrets?
Regrets when I was in the top?
Yes.
The regret that I always have, which I don't know if I'd have done anything differently, but I definitely have regrets, is that I watch videos of my kids and I watch pictures of them as they grew up, and I go, where did those days all go? Even though I was there, I wonder how the days went so fast. And here's the funny part. I come in contact with a lot of women who gave up their jobs to be with their kids. And then when the kids leave the home, they have deep regrets that they gave up the job. People like me didn't give up the kids, but we were not there all the time. And I have some regrets for not being with them. So there's this bundle of regret that just goes around.
Let me ask you that very difficult core question though, but can you be a kind of dedicated mom and be a CEO of a Fortune 500 company?
We have to make it happen. Because let me tell you why. We keep talking about the tippy top. Women come into the workforce in large numbers. In levels 2 and 3, the pipeline is not leaking, it's broken. Because they're leaving in such large numbers because we don't have a care system that works. We don't have flexible work hours. All flexibility was done has not been talked about, because the job has been set up for, the 9-to-5 job has been set up for a time when the man went to work, when the woman stayed at home.
Right.
We have to redefine the future of work, not from an AI and automation perspective, but on flexibility and care. We have to redesign housing. There's just so much that has to be done. But I'm going to challenge you guys something. Sometime in 2021, the book will come out, because I don't want to be in the political election cycle. When it comes out, clearly some people will take umbrage to the fact that I'm saying women have to be in the workforce. There will be criticism. This is where I need this sisterhood to step up to support me. Okay, please. Because I'm not, somebody asked me today at the boardroom meeting, why are you taking this on as an issue? You could have written about a lot of other things. I just felt I had to pay it forward. I know what I went through, and in so many forums, women ask me this question, how did you do it? With a lot of pain. Some even have tears. And I felt it was my job to do something that evoked a national discussion on this topic. So I'm going to take it on the road, symposium, go to the Hill, talk about this issue in a significant way.
So, Indra, I don't have a question.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm Betty Del Bianco from Celestica. And I don't have a question, I have a request, because Mary Stevens and I here were talking about, we've seen you speak a number of times at this conference, and you one time told the story about the day you were appointed president of Pepsi, and you came home and your mother telling you about leaving the
old
Crown Rush.
story.
And I've retold that story so many times, and I'm sure I've like bungled the details over time. I would just love if you would just tell.
Has anybody not heard the story? Oh, you haven't heard it? Oh, God. Okay, so this is way back in 2000, and when I became president of the company, I was working very late because we were integrating Quaker Oats. And so, I think it was 10 o'clock or something, Steve Reinemann, who was going to become CEO, called me and said, Indra, we're going to appoint you president and put you on the board of directors. I said, okay, I better go home and tell my folks this is what's happening. I left the office at 10, I came home, pulled into the garage, went up the stairs, and my mother was waiting there for me. And I said, Mom, I got big news for you. She said, the news is going to have to wait because I need you to go out and buy milk. And I said, okay, but explain to me why you didn't have the help. Go get the milk. I forgot. When did my husband get home? She said, about 8. Why didn't you ask him to buy the milk? He looked tired. Okay? You're laughing because you can experience this, right? So the guy is tired. She didn't ask him. She waited for me till 10 o'clock. She stayed up, this poor lady, till 10 o'clock till I showed up. So, you don't ask any questions of your mom. So you go get the milk. You dump it on the counter and say, I got big news for you. I'm president. I'm going to be on the board of directors. And all that you wanted was to talk about milk. And she said, let me explain something to you. You can be president, board of directors. I don't care what that is. I don't even know what it means. But when you enter this house, you're the wife, you're the daughter, you're the mother of the kids, you're the daughter-in-law. Just leave that crown in the garage. Life will be good.
So, and we have to finish out because I know you have to get to a plane, but how much of this, we always talk about policy and structures and unconscious bias and all this, but how much of it is culture that keeps women from moving to the top?
In a family, if everybody brings their crown into the home, there's going to be chaos. Okay, so my point is, if the only price I have to pay is to leave the crown in the garage, so be it. Because I have my crown in my head. I don't need a physical crown,
Yeah.
So my point is, okay, fine, I'll leave the crown in the garage. Inside, I'm thinking to myself, I got the crown, I feel pretty good. But outside, I'm the best spouse, I'm the best everything. I keep my mouth shut. I've learned that I have one mouth in 2 years. And so I learned to speak carefully at home. Carefully. Just say the right things. Don't think you have to. You don't want your kids and your husband to think they're your employees.
Yeah.
Very important.
And how many of us are guilty of that? Okay.
Very important.
Off to Singapore you go. Stop. Is everybody going to be here when the book comes out? And okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Start a dialogue. It's full of solutions. Start a dialogue. And let's make it our book, not my book. I'll just use my, 12 years as CEO to write the book. I'm going to throw my head, heart, and hands into it, but it's a book for us. So let us figure out how to do it together. Right? Great. Thank you all. Meena,